Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest in our series of Anaphylaxis campaign webinars. As I hope you all know, this webinar is taking place during our Allergy Awareness Week, where we're trying to raise awareness of the issues regarding severe allergies and also to raise some money through fundraising as well. So it's a very important week for us. And as part of that week, we've got a number of activities, including these webinars. I'm absolutely delighted today to welcome a team of people, not just one individual speaker, which is a real bonus. The title of the webinar is Managing the Emotional and Psychological Impact of Food Allergy, and presenting today is a team from the University of Surrey, and I will do a brief introduction to each member of the team, and then they will all take part in the presentation. We have allowed some time for questions at the end of the webinar, and we will try to fit some in. There will be a full Q&A of all the questions submitted during the webinar, prior to the webinar and after the webinar, and we will get the answers from these lovely ladies and we will put them on our website so members can access not only the webinar or pass it on to others, but everyone will also be able to see the Q&A. And we found with our previous webinars that people are really keen to look at the questions that others have asked. So I'll start by introducing everybody, and I'll start with Holly Tarrantire. And Holly is currently completing her doctorate in clinical psychology at the University of Surrey. Her research is focused on supporting young people aged 12 to 17 with food allergies and managing anxiety. As part of her doctorate, she's also on placement working in schools to support young people transitioning back to school during COVID-19 school closure. So that's a really topical area, not only for children with food allergies, but all children. We also have Becca Edgecombe, and again, Becca's completing a doctorate in clinical psychology at the University of Surrey. She worked as a psychological well-being practitioner prior to starting her doctorate course. As a psychological well-being practitioner, she supported adults with physical health problems to use cognitive behavior therapy to help cope with distress associated with their condition. So a good mix there with Becca's focus on adults. Then we have Gina Shylock, who's completing her doctorate in clinical psychology at the University of Surrey. We've got a bit of a theme here. Her research focuses on psychological interventions for parents whose quality of life and well-being are affected by a child's food allergy. Prior to clinical training, Gina worked as a research assistant on a number of studies aiming to improve the quality of life of family carers by improving the quality of treatment and the care they receive. And then finally, there's a face that may be familiar to many of you. It's certainly a face that's very familiar to me, because Chrissy has been a very long-standing good friend of the Anaphylaxis campaign, helped us out with the information we provide. She's spoken at conferences and support group meetings. So huge thank you to Chrissy for coming along today. And Chrissy, Dr. Chrissy Jones, is a reader in clinical health psychology at the University of Surrey and is a chartered member of the British Psychological Society. Her main research interests are in developing accessible psychological interventions to improve outcomes for children and young people with asthma and with allergy, and also for their parents. And Chrissy is research supervisor to Holly, to Becca, and to Gina, as well as a number of doctorates in clinical psych, other trainees doing their clinical psychology doctorate. So welcome to you all. And without further ado, I'll hand over to you, lovely ladies, to take the presentation forward.
Lovely. Thank you so much, Lynn and Joanna and everyone at the Anaphylaxis campaign for having us. This is a topic really close to my heart, and now Gina, Becca and Holly's hearts too. And we hope we can you find this session helpful. Holly, are you ready to share slides?
Yeah, I'll just get them up.
Thank you. So we've had that very warm welcome from Lynn here. Just to give you, I'm not going to speak very much. I'm handing over to three very capable trainee clinical psychologists, but I just wanted to give you a bit of context here. As you're probably really well aware, there's not very many specialist services for psychology and allergy across the UK. So I feel like I'm trying to make it my mission to train some of our clinical psychologists in allergy related care, allergy related distress and anxiety. So at least if once they've qualified, if they don't move into a specialist psychological allergy service, if it's more of a generalized health service, they might have some understanding or appreciation for the difficulties that people living with allergies and their carers have. So just want to say that's my mission. As well as Holly, Becca and Gina, I supervise two other trainees who are looking at psychological interventions for allergy as well. Our email addresses will be during the presentation, so do get in touch if you're interested or have any other questions. But without further ado, I will pass over to the team and to Gina, who's going to kick us off with some of the research into this area and what we know so far.
Right, thank you, Chrissy. Okay, can we go to the next slide, Holly? Thank you, great. So, well, we know that living with a food allergy can carry a large psychosocial burden. So there's no registered medicine to treat food allergy. So treatment involves avoidance of the implicated food, which can often be difficult. And many people experience reactions each year, which are often unpredictable and potentially severe, meaning that those living with a food allergy can feel burdened by the constant threat of accidental exposure. Next slide. We go to So this psychosocial burden of food allergy is starting to be understood a bit more in the research. And in the last 10 years, research has been published on the psychological impact of food allergy. So there has been a focus on a number of different areas, from developing food allergy specific outcome measures to studying what might make people feel more confident in being able to manage their food allergy. And here at the University of Surrey, we've been concentrating on evaluating psychological interventions to manage the emotional and psychological impact of living with or caring for someone with a food allergy. So why are interventions needed? So food allergy has been found to cause psychological distress in young people, adults, and parents of children with a food allergy. And this impact is evident across the allergy life course. So for parents, we know that the psychological impact of food allergy can start before a diagnosis. So research has told us that about 32% of parents experience anxiety and about 17.5% experience depression prior to attending an allergy clinic for a diagnosis. And this process in itself might be lengthy and challenging. And we know that levels of anxiety and depression may not significantly drop after clinic attendance. And once a child has been given a diagnosis, many parents face high levels of responsibility with caring for their child. So I'm just wondering how many people here might feel guilty or find handing over care difficult. And if that applies to you, then you're not alone. So numerous studies have reported that parents often feel safer managing the food allergy alone due to fears that caregivers in other settings may not provide adequate care. But this sense of responsibility and the high levels of vigilance that accompany it can raise levels of stress and anxiety and inhibit quality of life in caregivers. So for young people themselves, the psychosocial burden of food allergy has also been recognised in the research. So we've already mentioned how when a child is young, the parent may take on a large proportion of the allergy management and care. And when the young person matures, they may take on a bit more of this responsibility for managing the allergy. And greater anxiety in young people has been generally associated with more responsibility for their own self-care. And this might be particularly the case for those with a history of life-threatening reaction. We also know that young people might start to feel a bit more aware of their food allergy as they get older. So again, I'm just wondering how many people in this audience might have experienced feelings of being different or alone because of their food allergy. And again, we know that you're not alone, as the research has identified that young people have reported feeling isolated due to their food allergy. However, the good news is that research has also identified that support groups for young people have provided opportunities for people to connect with others who understand what they're going through and share similar experiences. Okay. Next slide, please. Thank you. So looking towards adults and individuals with food allergy, again, research has identified that there is a link between food allergy and internalizing problems. So those are problems where we tend to keep our thoughts and our emotions inside, for example, things like depression and anxiety. And greater psychosocial burden is experienced for those with multiple food allergies, higher illness uncertainty, and those with adrenaline autoinjectors. If what we've discussed so far sounds familiar to you, it's a sign that you're really not alone in how you're feeling. So in summary, research has identified how many events throughout the allergy life course can lead to reduced health-related quality of life and impact our psychological distress levels. And given this impact, the need for interventions to improve psychological outcomes and well-being is of really high importance. So now if we start to look a bit about the research that's already been done on managing well-being. Here is an example of a review of freely available online support. And looking at freely available information is really important, as individuals living with allergies have requested more information to mitigate the psychosocial impact of food allergy. But due to recognised shortages of specialist psychologists, many turn to the internet and social media. So in this recent review, it was found that problem-focused approaches, so those are things such as reading labels and carrying an adrenaline auto-injector, are very, very sensible, and they help to manage the practical aspects of the allergy. But actually, we don't know about their impact on the emotional side of managing the allergy. There was more evidence that emotion-focused coping approaches, so for example, positive self-talk, are associated with better emotional well-being. But these approaches have not been explored using experimental methods, and those are methods that really establish cause and effect. So overall, the online support that was available can be very, very helpful for signposting individuals to existing resources. However, in this review, it was found that there was little information in relation to low mood, and we're unsure how effective these self-help resources are for managing emotional well-being. And information in them might be helpful, but needs further research using high-quality experimental methods. And a recent review on interventions for caregivers of children with food allergy found, again, there was a lack of high quality research evaluating interventions to improve outcomes in parents of children with food allergy. But there was evidence that suggested that CBT, so that's cognitive behavioural therapy interventions, could benefit some mothers. But again, this evidence hasn't been tested in other populations, such as with fathers, with individuals with food allergy, or with children and young people. So to summarise a bit about what we've talked about in the research, attention to the psychological impact of food allergies and anaphylaxis is increasing. And we know that food allergies impact on the whole family and not just the individual. The impact and related needs are likely to change across the allergy life course. And research has already started to identify interventions that can positively impact individuals and their families. But at the moment, more is needed. So this is where our research comes in. So recognising the need for psychological interventions, we are evaluating CBT-based workshops to see if these are acceptable and feasible to those managing a food allergy. And we're also looking to see if there's initial evidence that CBT workshops can improve emotional well-being. So Holly's research focuses on supporting young people aged 11 to 17 with a food allergy. Holly is still looking for interested individuals to take part, so please contact her by email after this webinar if you'd like to know more about it. My research focuses on supporting parents of children with food allergy, and Rebecca's research focuses on supporting adults with food allergy. So as you can see, our emails are on this slide here, if you'd like to know more about the research. And also at the end of this webinar, we would love to hear from you about one thing that you would like to change with regards to your well-being following this webinar. So please feel free to jot down our contact details and get in touch with us. And we'll also give you a reminder about this at the end of the webinar. And thank you so much for listening about the research. And now I'm going to hand you over to Holly and Rebecca, who are going to explain a bit more about the psychology of anxiety and how we might use strategies to manage this.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Gina, for explaining all the research behind it. And as Gina was kind of saying there, there's a lot of different kind of emotional impact of anxiety, whether that's kind of low mood or the uncertainty and the anxiety talked about. And anxiety, tends to be one of the big ones, and the ones that we know is most kind of crucial to support with. So that's why we're going to focus on anxiety today. But obviously there's a lot of different emotions, and anxiety can also feed into a lot of different emotions as well. So hopefully by understanding anxiety can help with lots of other things as well. And the thing with anxiety as well, it can all impact us in lots of different ways and in lots of different parts of kind of the food allergy journey as things change or things become more clear or more uncertain as a pandemic comes into things. So what we wanted to do today was really explain a bit more about what our understanding of anxiety is, how we can recognise it, and then go into a few strategies in terms of then what can then help when it gets a bit overwhelming as well. So the key first step is really be able to notice and name it and say, okay, I'm feeling anxious, and understanding what it is first. So to look at anxiety, we're going to firstly kind of go back and have a look at the different parts of the brain. So 3 parts of the brain are really important for our response or our anxiety response, so how we respond to kind of the feared situation. And these 3 parts of our brain are our survival brain, and that's our brainstem. It controls, our heart rate, our sleep-wake cycle, our body temperature, basically kind of, all the essential things that we need to keep us alive. The next stage is the emotional brain, which kind of does what it says on the tin. It controls our emotions and regulates our emotions. And then lastly, our thinking brain, or our frontal lobe, which does all the kind of our high level thinking, problem solving, communication, kind of all those more kind of high level thinking skills that we need to help us get around really as well. And the reason why we look at these 3 different parts of the brain is because they're really crucial in our response to a situation that we might find anxiety provoking. And what tends to happen when we're anxious is that part in the front of our brain, our frontal lobe, our thinking brain, which allows us to kind of think clearly and problem solve and do that high level evaluation of the situation, tends to go offline. So when we think we're in danger, unfortunately, the part of the brain that we probably want to be able to use the most goes offline, and instead we're kind of controlled by the other 2 parts of the brain. So that means that our emotions can become really big and really strong. And then also the survival brain kicks in and activates the fight or flight response. So this means that our bodies are preparing us to respond to the danger by either fighting it or by running away. And this is an automatic response which affects our thoughts, our physical feelings in our body, or our behaviours. So I don't know if anyone else kind of recognises that feeling of when, you know, you're feeling anxious or nervous about something and it's really hard to think clearly, and all it is that really uncomfortable feelings of emotions getting bigger and also just feeling more uncomfortable. And we're going to look a bit more at that to understand that process a bit more. And some of you might already be familiar with the fight or flight response. But the reason why that we have this response is because our brains evolved, you know, 200,000 years ago when cavemen were the ones roaming the earth, and they regularly came across dangers such as lions or tigers or bears day to day every time they went out their cave. So they needed that emergency system to just kind of kick in and say, okay, I'm either going to fight this bear or I'm going to run away from it. Kind of, these are the only two options that we have. So it makes our muscles tense, so our legs are ready to run. Our breathing goes quicker, so there's more oxygen to power our muscles or to make our heart beat faster. Our thoughts might start racing to think about all the possible solutions or anything that could go wrong. And we can also maybe find it hard to think about anything else other than the danger that is right in front of us. And you can see how that is really helpful if we're, you know, faced with a tiger or a lion or a bear. However, in our day-to-day lives, hopefully none of you are coming across a kind of lion or tiger and bear too much. But what that system does is it's kind of like that inbuilt mechanism that warns us about danger. But because our society and technology have evolved quite quickly, the society has evolved a lot quicker than any change in our brains. So our brains kind of still respond to any kind of threat the same way as if we had to kind of either fight it or run away from it. Whereas actually, sometimes we might be able to do something a little bit different. So we need to understand more about anxiety so we can have more of a balance and more control about it. And what it can almost be like, it's a bit like if we're cooking something at home and the fire alarm goes off when something's just kind of burnt a little bit. You know, it's okay, we didn't need that full alarm, and actually it was fine. And that's a bit like anxiety as well, when that mechanism kind of goes off and it thinks we should respond an alarm, but actually it's okay. And lots of situations can set off our own inbuilt alarm, such as reading labels, worrying about a reaction, having an event coming up, the restaurants opening again after being closed, mealtime, sleepovers, all sorts of different things can kind of set off our inbuilt alarm mechanism because we can think there's a danger involved, which is absolutely understandable. And sometimes they can kick in the moment, or even just thinking about these situations can start it. But by understanding that it is anxiety, we can also understand that there's ways to kind of manage that uncomfortable feeling as well. And the sense of being able to get that little bit more control about it and say, okay, this is an anxiety-provoking situation, which is completely understandable given the need to being aware of all these things when it comes to food allergy. However, what I want to do is use a few more skills so I can use that thinking brain a bit more, because that's what's important really, because that's the kind of annoying thing about anxiety, is that actually these situations around food allergy that are anxiety-provoking, we want to be able to use our thinking brain and use, you know, our management plans or check things again, or you know, talk about our food allergy. So by using strategies to managing the anxiety around it can give us a bit more confidence in those situations as well. So by learning to be able to label that anxiety, it's also helpful to recognize what some of the symptoms of it are. So these are some examples of the physical symptoms of anxiety. And you might look at these and kind of recognize them as also some of the physical symptoms of an allergic reaction as well, such as you know, maybe a dry mouth, feeling dizzy, things like that, feeling sick or nauseous. And some of them might just be more linked to your anxiety as well. And that's the thing, that all these, when thinking about them in terms of anxiety, all of the body sensations produced during the fight or flight response are happening for a good reasons, as we said, to our body to run away or to fight them. But they are still uncomfortable, particularly if we're not sure why they're happening and if we're not sure if it is anxiety or if it is a reaction. So what can sometimes be really helpful is to have a think yourself about what your kind of anxiety reaction is and what maybe your allergic reaction is, and separate them out a little bit to think about that, but also have a think about what are the confusing kind of crossover symptoms as well, which are completely understandable. And then that can maybe help you think about what to do in response to noticing these kind of physical reactions as well. And obviously, if there is anything in the middle, which is the kind of unsure range, what we do always recommend is to always go with your allergy management plan, but hopefully by being able to pull out a few of the maybe more anxiety focused responses, that might help manage them in a bit more as well, as I said, to help bring on that thinking brain, to help you feel a bit more confident in situations, to manage them going forwards as well. So in terms of when we should intervene, now that we understand a bit more about anxiety, and the fact that it's something that we all have inbuilt with us that is helpful, because it is there to help us recognise danger and respond to it accordingly. So we all need it really, because if we weren't anxious at all, you know, we wouldn't look before we cross the road. You know, we wouldn't check those, you know, the food labels for the first time. You know, we need that anxiety to help keep us safe and to help us really just function as humans. But sometimes, as we said, that inbuilt alarm can just go a little bit too far, and we want to be able to control it when it gets a bit excessive or it's impacting kind of on quality of life a bit much. So at one end of the scale is when we don't have enough worry, if we don't assess risk enough, not carrying EpiPens, that can then cause high risk of accidental exposure. So in that sense, we want you to be kind of more aware of things. Whereas on the other side is when it's might be a lot more high stress, you know, more anxiety, really hypervigilant, always double checking things, always feeling on the lookout for things. Even if in a situation where we've done all the things to keep us safe, we can still find ourselves checking things and not being able to enjoy the moment, and really impacting maybe on sleep, impacting on being able to enjoy things. And it might be that even things that we used to be able to do, we've kind of stopped doing because of feeling uncomfortable, and that also might have been impacted as well by the pandemic, because obviously a lot of things have changed in that way. And in terms of when we should intervene, it will be different for everyone, but it is really about balancing, the idea of balancing kind of risk of exposure with kind of the impact on quality of life. And it's about finding what works for you and equipping with a bit more confidence to manage these kind of anxiety provoking situations in a way that works for you. And kind of maybe if you feel like you're up near the high end, particularly as we know from the research, helping you kind of find a ways that help you feel a bit more comfortable to come a little bit towards the middle. And as we said, it's helpful in food allergy. So it's okay if you still feel like even after putting strategies into place and managing anxiety a bit more, you're still kind of high up. But if you can feel like you can manage it a bit more and not impacting on quality of life as much, then that's a good point as well. So in terms of how anxiety is maintained, understanding it from a CBT perspective or a cognitive behavioural perspective, we kind of think about the connection between our thoughts, our feelings, and what we do. So we could have thoughts that something bad could happen, such as exposure to a food, or just being nervous about going into new situations, can make us feel anxious, worried, or scared, start to notice those physical feelings of anxiety, maybe feeling sick or feeling dizzy. And then, that might result in us avoiding anything that could result in whatever we were feared to happen in the first place. And avoidance is helpful in the short term, as it can relieve those feelings of anxiety. But what it does in the long term is it doesn't allow us to be in situations that we can learn to then be okay, and to help us kind of put in strategies that can help us then feel safe and okay about a situation, to have less kind of worrisome thoughts and feelings about it. So what we understand in CBT is it is then about gradually building up to situations we can feel a bit more confident in them again, to help re-engage in a way that helps you feel comfortable, and to start to kind of approach these situations that maybe we have been avoiding, that we could start to go into again, but as I said, in a really gradual way to feel comfortable going about it. And the reason, another way to kind of start to think about this as well, is when we think about the thought side of things. So sometimes in response to, say, a reaction, we can have thoughts such as, it was my fault for not reading the label, why am I such an idiot? And it can result in kind of feeling sad, frustrated, avoidance, as I've already spoken about. And it's almost kind of human nature to go into default into that self-critical voice and that self-critical attitude about things. And it's kind of hard to be able to step back and see a full perspective. But by challenging those thoughts maybe a little bit and thinking, you know, okay, what would I tell a friend in this situation, to, you know, applying some kind of self-care in terms of how we evaluate the situation, in terms of what went well. We could look at a situation in a slightly different way, the exact same situation, but it could be something like, okay, mistakes happen, I can learn from this, I can read the label next time, and thankfully I had my EpiPen, it was okay. You know, acknowledging that things were tricky, and obviously it wasn't great that they had a reaction, it was still really rubbish, but actually it's not impacting them as much. You know, they've learned from what happened there, and they made a plan to deal with it in the future, and kind of problem solve that around that as well. So it's really about thinking about how we can take perspective and kind of challenge that kind of automatic negative thinking that we can sometimes fall into, to be able to look at it kind of from maybe a different perspective. In terms of what you can do though, kind of from this webinar, is to really have a think about what you want to achieve and what is and what is not a problem, because what is a problem for you might not be a problem for, you know, or lots of other people with food allergies that you know as well. So thinking about where it is that you feel happy to kind of, or that you want to work on. So what it is that maybe you feel like really is impacting you or you find quite difficult. And then, as we said, the first step is to really acknowledge and name the anxiety. So to make space to really be able to talk about it and say, okay, this is anxiety. Let me speak about it. And even just by naming it could be quite powerful within itself. And, you know, you've got a loved one with a food allergy, to kind of help them name it as well and be like, could that be allergy? Could that be anxiety speaking? Should we talk about it a bit more, and bring those kind of conversations into, you know, kind of more day-to-day conversations. Sometimes you do just have to accept the things that we cannot change, and there are things, you know, we wish we really have a big impact on, but unfortunately we can't, and more about focusing energy on the things that we can change. So to be able to take a bit more control back and decrease anxiety whilst increasing confidence. So things like educating others around us, talking to people prior to an event, being clear about our needs, having clear management plans, being assertive in our communication as well, and kind of, you know, not taking unclear answers, and, you know, being confident within that as well. And then reflecting on what is going well and what isn't, and really thinking about, I guess, the narrative that food allergy can sometimes be really dominant within our lives, kind of bringing in other narratives as well in terms of our friends or what we enjoy, and then keeping food allergy there in terms of what is helpful, and kind of the day-to-day conversation about it, but letting other things come into the kind of conversation as well, whilst reflecting on what is working, what isn't. And then, as we said as well, kind of keeping that perspective of, okay, this is really tough, and we know it's really tough, and we know that lots of people find these things really difficult, but what have I done well? You know, I did check those things, I've followed these plans, you know, I tried it out, even if things aren't going particularly well, you know, trying it out as well is really good. And in terms of managing these worries, one thing we're not saying is, we're not saying they're not real concerns or worries, because they definitely all are. Becca's just going to go over some strategies to help manage, to not let the kind of anxiety get in his way as much. And as I said as well, sort of each family or individual will be on their own journey. So we don't need to assume that we even all have the same goals as well. So, you know, some people's goals might be going out to restaurants or going on holidays, and some might be completely different to that as well. So just working towards what feels right for you and the situation for you and kind of your family as well.
Thanks, Holly. So we thought we'd zoom in on how to manage worry, because yeah, we know how worrying it is to have a food allergy, and how difficult it is. So largely we can group worry into two different types. So the types are practical and hypothetical worries. So as Holly said, food allergy is a very real worry, and at no point would we say, oh, it isn't. So do you know, bear that in mind. But categorizing worry in this way can might be able to help you see what might be in your control and which bits may not be. So I'll just explain what I mean by practical and hypothetical. So practical worries are those that are affecting you now, and for which there is a practical solution. So with worries about current problems, you do usually have some direct control over the situation. You might need to look for it sometimes, but usually you do have some direct control. So it might be that you've got to go into hospital to have a procedure or an operation. And obviously that it's really important that you let them know about your food allergy. So you might be a bit worried because you've got an allergy, but a way to deal with that is to let people know. And obviously, given the very real concern about your food allergy, there are helpful ways to help protect yourself. So carrying around your AAI if you need one, following your anaphylaxis management plan, reading food labels, making friends, family, restaurants, work, school aware of your food allergy, and seeking advice from healthcare providers. And obviously that, you know, the list is endless. There's lots more things on there. Another thing that isn't related to food allergy, another practical worry might be if, you know, you're driving along and you notice a knocking sound coming from your car. A practical solution is to take it to a garage. So there it's very clear, you can kind of see that you can do something about it, or at least book an appointment ASAP to see one. So hypothetical worries are things that do not currently exist but might happen in the future. So they're very future focused and quite uncertain, and they may not have a solution no matter how hard you try and look for one. They're usually like what if questions. So what if this happens? What if I can't cope if this were to happen? And so they quite naturally lead us to thinking about the worst case scenarios and lead us to catastrophizing, really. So it might be that you're, you know, going around a new friend's house for dinner, and you're kind of worried about telling them about your food allergy because you don't want them to think you're difficult or fussy. And it can kind of it might end up kind of snowballing into imagining them actually rejecting you. And the thing is, you know, unless they have actually done something like that really nasty in the past, you don't know that they would actually respond in that way, because you're not a mind reader. And obviously, if they did do that, they wouldn't be a very good friend. But yeah, so other worries might be, well, what if people think I'm strange for carrying a big bag for my AAI on a night out? Or what if I get very sick and I can't take care of my children? And obviously, you know, these will be different for everyone. So if you are quite unwell and that might be happening soon, then that may not be a hypothetical worry. But if you're very healthy and that's not on the cards, and you know that, then it may well be a hypothetical worry. So I think it can be quite difficult to tell the difference between the two sometimes. So Holly's just going to show a new slide, which helps us to distinguish. So it's called the worry tree, and it basically helps you to categorize your worries into either practical or hypothetical. So the best thing to do when you're doing this is firstly just to become aware. So when you notice yourself feeling worried or feeling anxious, just stop and ask yourself, what was going through my mind just then? What was I worrying about? And you might choose to write it down, or you might just choose to ask yourself in your head. So ask yourself, can I actually do something about this? If you can't, so if the answer is no, it's likely to be a hypothetical worry. And so we would say to let the worry go, and we will go through some strategies about how to do that in a second. But yeah, so we would say to let the worries go if that is the case. If you can do something about it, what's stopping you? So the best thing to do is just to do it. So if you've noticed that there's that sound coming out of your car, take it to the garage. It might be that it's not convenient for you to do it now, in which case, can you do it later? But the idea is to be really specific about when that is going to happen. So rather than just kind of saying, oh, well, I'll take it to the garage later, kind of think, well, what am I going to do? What do I need to do this? What's going to work? And then it might be that you've done all you can to deal with the worry, but you're still anxious about it. So then we would say to let the worry go at this stage.
Becca, what about for those that feel like no matter what they worry about, there's always going to be a practical solution? There's always something that can be done about a worry.
Yeah, completely. Yeah. I think that they often do start as practical. All hypothetical worries do often start as practical, and then can kind of morph almost. So they do tend to have a bit of a mixture by their nature, which is why they can become quite confusing. So if you're someone who feels that you can always do something about your worries, then I would say just to do them. So do all the practical things, and then kind of notice, well, am I still worried at this point? If you're not worried, then brilliant. That's fantastic. That's problem solved. But if you are actually still worried and there's nothing further you can do about it, I'd say to go back to your worry tree and really kind of recognize that within yourself, that there's nothing further that you can do. And you can go through the letting worry go techniques that we'll go through in a minute, but it's really just to make yourself aware of that, because sometimes your brain is really looking for an answer when sometimes there isn't one. So yeah, it's just to make yourself aware of that. Yeah, that's how I'd answer that.
Okay, thanks. And could you tell me a bit more about how I'm supposed to let this worry go as well then?
Yeah, completely. So I would say to go on to the next slide, and then I can kind of to explain it to you. So I've got a bit of an analogy for you before going into the techniques. So what I want people to do, if you feel comfortable, is to imagine that you're standing in a lake, and for some reason you've got a beach ball. And I want you to imagine that your worry is this inflatable ball. And just imagine yourself trying to push it into the water really, really hard. And when I imagine myself pushing this ball into the water really, really hard, it can come back up. It pops back up, and it actually hits me in the face. That's how I imagine it. And it actually gets quite tiring the more you try and push this ball into the water. And I think that's really similar to worry. So the more we try and push our worries away into the water, the stronger they become and the more they're going to come back at us. So rather than doing this, try to imagine letting the worry go and watch it float away from you. So you might find that the current pulls the worry back. That's okay, it's completely normal. Using the letting go techniques will help you to think about how to do this. But you will notice at first that the worries come back quite easily, and that is completely normal. The more you get into the habit of managing your worries, managing your hypothetical worries, the less strong they will become, and the less they'll kind of fight you in that way. And also, just to say, thinking ahead is actually really important. It's how we kind of navigate through life, and obviously it's very much needed for food allergies. But if you are someone who has noticed that your well-being is really affected by worry, and you're becoming really anxious, it might be an idea for you to try and use some letting worry go techniques for the worries that you don't actually have that control over. So next slide, sorry, Holly. So we've got some ideas that you can use to help you to let them go. So not all of these will be relevant to everyone, and you may find that you've used some of them before and they've not been helpful. So what we'd say is to have a bit of an experiment and find which works for you. So the first one we've got is to write the worries down. So what we would say is once you've gone through the worry tree and you know that the worry is not a practical worry, that it's a hypothetical worry, write down actually what it is. And you could do that on your phone, or you could do it in a diary. Then try and refocus on what you were doing before you noticed yourself worrying. Or it might be that you choose to do a different activity. And you might find that the worry keeps coming back. Again, that's absolutely normal, that's fine. Just say to yourself, I've written the worry down, and now I'm going to go back to what I was doing before. And the trick is as well is to not to write down the same worry down twice. Once you've written it down once, it's fine. You don't need to keep writing it down. And then when you get to the end of the day, what we would say is to throw the worries away and then to start afresh the next day. So you don't feel like you need to keep the same piece of paper, because it would get quite endless. So do throw them away if you want to by the next day. And then the other idea we've got is to change your focus of attention. So obviously worrying is quite a busy activity. It takes up a lot of attention. So it's a really good idea to try and do something different. So think about something that is very absorbing. So it might be that you really enjoy playing games, or doing puzzles, or it might be you've got a friend who's very kind of interesting, so you could talk to them. Or it might be that you want to follow a new recipe. Just choose something that's not too boring. So if you know that watching a particular TV program is not going to engage you at all, and you're just going to end up zoning out and worrying, then try and not do that. And that'll be different for everyone. The other idea we've got is physical exercise. So this is great because not only is it kind of something that is good for your attention, it also uses up a lot of the adrenaline that Holly was talking about, which happens when we feel anxious. So it's really good about at using up all of that spare adrenaline that you might have in your body. So ideas are for, maybe going for a walk. You could do a spring clean, you could do yoga, or a new workout on YouTube. It can be helpful to do something that you've not done before, because it's like learning again, and so it's kind of again using up that attention. The other idea we've got is mindful activity. So maybe choose an activity that you normally do without thinking about it. So that could be like brushing your teeth or driving your car, and really try and notice things that you don't normally pay attention to. So, that might be textures, smells, bodily sensations, and really try and focus on what it feels like to do that activity mindfully. And you might find that you're noticing things that you hadn't noticed before. We've also got imagery. So this could be guided. So you could find that online, or you could also create your own image. So like visualization, and this can be really helpful again for kind of refocusing away from your worries. So it might be that you imagine an outdoor place where you feel calm, peaceful and safe. This might be a place that you've gone to before. It might be somewhere that you've dreamt about going, or maybe somewhere that you've seen a picture of. So when you're there, really try and notice what colours you might see, what shapes, movement, light, sounds, smells, and bodily sensations. So it could be anything, like a forest or a beach, anything that you like. I'm going to talk now a bit about relaxation on the next slide. So obviously you can find lots of different kind of mindfulness and relaxation online. I can go through an example as well, if people would like. So what I want you to do, sorry.
I just have one question, because I really liked all the examples of learning it go, and I just know that some people maybe might have tried mindfulness before, or tried an exercise or seen something, and what if they've kind of tried one before and it hasn't really suited them? What would you say then?
Yeah, I think that's so common, Holly. Like often mindfulness and relaxation won't be right for everybody. There'll be some things that you might try which you really don't like. So for example, there are some people who actually find breathing exercises a bit uncomfortable. It might be that it's a bit too close to home in terms of anxiety. So if you find that too uncomfortable, we would say to try something else. So progressive muscle relaxation is a different type of relaxation exercise, which is not thinking so much about breathing, but it's thinking about your body and relaxing your muscles. So we would say to maybe try that out, but again, there are loads of other things that you can try. Yeah, okie dokie, Chrissy, will do. Yeah, so there are lots of other things you can try, like maybe going on a kind of a mindful walk, and just paying more attention to detail of normal activities, and just trying to add this to your daily routine as well. So I think we need to wrap up now in terms of relaxation, but this is just an example that people might want to try at home, where you're kind of imagining that you've got either a balloon or a beach ball in your stomach, and as you're breathing in, you're imagining it's getting bigger, and then as you breathe out, it's getting smaller. And what I really like about this exercise, which is why I chose it, is that it's not only getting you to think about your breathing and your body, but it's getting you to imagine something in your head as well. And so it's a good thing to get you focusing away from your worry if that is a difficulty for you. So next slide, please. Yeah, great. So this is just a slide in terms of what help is out there if you need it. So the first slide is food allergy therapeutic worksheets. And then the second two after that are very CBT focused. So it's not specific to food allergy, but there are some really good ones in there. And there are definitely relaxation in those two different links. And then we've got some helplines as well. So we've got the Samaritans, Anaphylaxis campaign, Allergy UK, Anxiety UK, and obviously you can always visit your GP if you need to. So just as a reminder, these are our contact details and our names, if you did want to make a note of that. And just as a reminder as well, if you do want to let us know about one thing you'd like to change as a result of this webinar today, then we would love to hear it. But yeah, thanks so much for your time, and yeah, any questions?
Thank you very much for those brilliant presentations. Excellent. Very, very informative, with an awful lot of content there. And we've had a large number of people who've been listening to this webinar, and you'll be pleased to note that they've all stuck with it right to the end. So you've obviously held everybody's attention. Absolutely fantastic. We have got a few questions. As I say, I will make a couple of points now, and then we'll put the other questions on our website so that people can, we can send them to you, to the team via Chrissy, and you can come back with the answers, and we will put them in a full Q&A to go with the webinar for our members so that they can access it. So thank you very, very much for that. And the slides, we're being asked where the slides will be, and they will certainly be on our website and accessible to all members with the Q&A. The one point that came in during the presentations, which I thought was really interesting, was that very often the focus for psychological health is on parents and on children, but actually there is also a need for psychological support for adults as well. Now, we know across the UK there aren't that many adult allergy clinics, they're more paediatric clinics, but would you like to say what you would advise adults who are seeking support?
I'm happy to take that one first, and then maybe Becca can follow up, given her IAP experience. But I couldn't agree more. I mean, the support for adults is even poorer really than the support for parents and children, which is why really Becca's doing her research in adults, because we realise this is an overlooked group in the allergy world. So that's why we're really trying to I guess create these what we call manualized interventions, so that actually we can train other people. They don't have to necessarily be psychologists to deliver these workshops if we find them to be helpful and accessible for adults themselves. And I couldn't agree more. I think it's really problematic, and hence why we're training clinical psychologists like Becca, Holly and Gina to do this sort of research and to have a real understanding of what it's like to experience allergy. Becca, do you want to say anything about access that adults do have, but it's non-specialised? So I don't know if you want to say any more about that.
Yeah, so in England, adults can access IAPT, which is improving access to psychological interventions. But again, as Chrissy says, it's not specific to food allergy. There's no pathway which is specific to food allergy, which is a real shame. So, you know, whether it might be that the therapists don't know actually what some of the complexities are in relation to food allergy. So again, that's kind of where we hope to change things, really, to get therapists kind of really understanding what the differences are, and so that they're able to help people.
I think to add to that, I mean, that's how I envisage if we find, I mean, we're looking at lots of different psychological interventions. So whilst Gina, Holly and Becca are all using CBT, we are looking at mindfulness-based approaches. I'm thinking maybe some compassion-based interventions in the future would be helpful as well. And I think if we've got a whole kind of plethora or range of interventions, because we know not one single intervention works for everyone, but if we've got these and they're accessible to people who may be less familiar, but they can pick them off the shelf almost and think, okay, someone's done this work, this is how they've adapted it to work for people with allergies, this is how I can use it for people with allergies, even without being specialist trained, then that's better than not having any support available at all. But it's something I feel really strongly about. Yeah.
I would agree, and in fact we had a few follow-up questions to that on that same area about how can you help older people, for example, with dementia who may have food allergy, and that can cause a lot of anxiety, and also people in nursing homes. And we've now developed our allergy-wise online courses for nursing homes, because again, people seem to have this view that once you get to a certain age, that's it. You don't need the help and support when actually you do. So that, I think that's a really important area. And I think the other point that comes out very clearly, and why this webinar particularly is so important, is that certainly personally, I've visited, must be about well over half the allergy, 140 odd allergy clinics up and down the UK over the last 13 years when I've been with the campaign. And well, clinical psychologists specialising in allergy are like hen's teeth. There are so few of you. There really are very, very few clinics, even major tertiary centres, that have clinical psychology input, which is why you're sharing your expertise in this way is so important. I don't know whether you'd like to make a comment on that, Chrissy, but certainly from my experience, you're very rare. You're very rare.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, I'm not even a clinical psychologist and I work in this area. So, I mean, I do, my background's health psychology, and I think I do clinical work. I have worked in children's services previously, but I think you're absolutely right. But I think we need to be thinking broader. So for those services whether we don't have these specialist services, how can we train maybe dietitians or nurses with these interventions, which is again why I'm so passionate about low intensity, accessible interventions, because often, you know, people who do require the more severe, I guess, or are experience more on the severe side of things, they'd meet referrals for psychological teams elsewhere, whereas actually that kind of low level but very real anxiety that lots of families have, how can they be met? How can their needs be met by their clinical teams who do know a lot about the physical aspects of allergy, and how can we improve that kind of holistic care? And as I say, if we've got resources which are easy for healthcare professionals to digest and to explain to patients and their carers, I think it's, you know, it seems like a win-win situation from my perspective, because I can't see all allergy services getting specialist support anytime soon, unfortunately.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And I'm sure we'll be having some follow-up webinars on this topic, just to warn you all in advance. We have run out of time. I'm looking at the chat, and we've had about 8 questions come in during the webinar. So there'll be a lot of work for you to do after the webinar to get those answers together for us so that we can publish them. But a huge thank you to you all, to Holly, Becca, to Gina, and also to Chrissy as well, for taking part in the webinar today. Thank you so much for helping us during our Allergy Awareness Week.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you everyone at the Anaphylaxis campaign and everyone for listening. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you all today.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.